Aminata Dlamini had been looking forward to this weekend for weeks. After non-stop work in Johannesburg, she finally had 2 whole days to herself and had planned a peaceful escape to the outskirts of the city. She imagined fresh air, quiet streets, and a break from the constant buzz of her life. But that calm was shattered the moment she stepped out of her apartment. Her heart skipped a beat. Her car, her pride and joy, a sleek midnight blue SUV she had worked months to save for, was gone. She stared at the empty space in disbelief, her mind racing. Then she noticed the note left on the dashboard. Squinting, she read it aloud, voice trembling. "Sorry, we needed it for Ayodele and the kids. Love, Mom and Dad." A rush of anger, confusion, and hurt flooded over her. How could her parents take her car without even asking? It wasn't just about the SUV. It was the principle, the betrayal of trust. This was her hard-earned possession, a symbol of her independence. And suddenly it was gone, handed over to her younger sister and her family without so much as a conversation. Aminata felt a mix of disbelief and frustration, her carefully planned weekend crumbling before it even began. As she stood there, gripping the note, a question burned in her mind. Was this just a one-time slip, or had her parents' favoritism quietly been undermining her all along? Either way, she knew she couldn't let this go. This weekend wasn't just about the car. It was about taking back what was rightfully hers. Aminata had always loved her younger sister Ayodele with all her heart. They had grown up close, sharing secrets, dreams, and even the little fights that sisters have. Ayodele was now a busy mother of 3, with a husband who traveled constantly for work. Aminata often helped whenever Ayodele needed support. School fees, doctor visits, even last-minute emergencies, and she never thought twice about it. Family was family, and she wanted her sister to succeed and be happy. But lately, Aminata had started noticing a pattern that hurt more than she cared to admit. Her parents always seemed to praise Ayodele as the responsible one, the perfect daughter, while Aminata's sacrifices were overlooked or quietly ignored. It was as if her efforts didn't count, as if she were invisible in the family hierarchy. And now, with her car gone, that invisible line had been drawn loud and clear. This wasn't just a small favor or a simple request. Taking her SUV without asking felt like a public announcement. It said without words that Ayodele's comfort and convenience mattered more than Aminata's plans or feelings. It stung deeply because Aminata had worked hard for that car. Every overtime hour, every penny saved had been for her independence. And yet here it was, temporarily taken as if it didn't belong to her. A mix of love and frustration swirled inside her. She didn't want to blame Ayodele. She knew her sister relied on the car and probably didn't even think twice about it. The real issue was the pattern of favoritism that her parents had been feeding for years, quietly shaping the family dynamic. Aminata realized this wasn't just about the SUV. It was about respect, recognition, and being valued for who she was and what she had done. Even as her chest tightened with anger and hurt, Aminata reminded herself of her love for Ayodele. She didn't want this to destroy their bond. But she also knew she couldn't stay quiet. If she let this slide, it would be yet another signal that her feelings didn't matter. This weekend she decided would be different. She wouldn't let favoritism and old family habits dictate how she felt or what she allowed. Her voice and her boundaries mattered, and it was finally time to make that clear. As Aminata stood staring at the empty parking space, anger bubbling in her chest, her mind drifted back to all the times she had quietly carried her family on her shoulders. She remembered paying for Ayodele's children's school fees when their parents refused, covering emergency medical bills when no one else would, and stepping in whenever there was a crisis at home. She had never boasted or asked for recognition. She didn't do it for praise. But over the years she had begun to notice a pattern. Her parents always called Ayodele the responsible one, the daughter who had it all together, the one they could rely on. Meanwhile, Aminata's countless sacrifices were quietly tucked away, as if they didn't exist. And now the SUV, her hard-earned, carefully saved SUV, had been taken without a word. It wasn't just a car anymore. It was a flashing reminder of everything she had given without acknowledgement, a symbol of years of being overlooked. The more Aminata thought about it, the more she realized this weekend wasn't just about a missing vehicle. It was about control, respect, and recognition. Her parents' actions weren't accidental. They were part of a long-standing habit of elevating one child while quietly sidelining another. Every decision, every gesture, every moment of favoritism had chipped away at her sense of value. The car was just the latest and painfully visible proof. Her blood boiled, but deep down a quiet determination settled in. This wasn't the moment to lash out blindly. This was the moment to stand up. She had given and sacrificed for years. But she had also learned that love and patience didn't mean letting herself be taken for granted. Her parents needed to understand that her efforts mattered, that her voice mattered, and that her boundaries couldn't be ignored any longer. Aminata took a deep breath, feeling the weight of frustration mix with a spark of courage. The weekend ahead wasn't just about reclaiming a car. It was about reclaiming herself, her worth, her dignity, and her right to be seen. For years she had quietly given. Now she was ready to speak, to assert, and to make sure her family finally understood that she was more than just the invisible daughter. This was her moment to turn years of silent sacrifice into power, respect, and recognition. Aminata took a deep breath, forcing herself to calm down. Stewing in anger wouldn't fix anything. It would only ruin her weekend and leave her feeling powerless. She wiped the tears from her cheeks and pulled out her phone. Her fingers hovered over the GPS app, heart pounding as she tracked her SUV. Relief mixed with frustration when she saw it moving, heading toward the Pretoria Hills. Her car was close, but so was her chance to take control. Without wasting a second, she called her best friend, Zanil. Just hearing Zanil's voice gave her strength. "Don't let them make you small, Aminata," Zanil said, her tone firm but encouraging. Together they started planning. They didn't want a messy shouting match. This wasn't about revenge. Aminata wanted her parents to understand her feelings, to finally see the consequences of their favoritism. They talked through every scenario, how she would stay calm, what she would say, and how she could make her point without letting emotions take over. Aminata felt a fire ignite inside her. For too long she had let her parents' choices, their favoritism, and their disregard for her sacrifices dictate how she felt. No more. This weekend she decided she would reclaim what was hers. Not just the SUV, but her voice, her boundaries, and her self-respect. She pictured herself walking into her parents' home, confident and composed. No more being the quiet, overlooked daughter. This time she would speak with clarity and strength. She would remind them that she had worked hard for every penny, that her sacrifices over the years had mattered, and that their favoritism had consequences. As she drove toward the Pretoria Hills, her nerves buzzed with anticipation, but she felt ready. The anger that had consumed her minutes ago had transformed into determination. Aminata wasn't just retrieving a car. She was taking a stand for herself, for her dignity, and for the respect she had long been denied. The weekend was no longer just a getaway. It was a turning point. With Zanil on the phone giving quiet advice and encouragement, Aminata knew one thing for certain. She was finally in control, and this time, nothing would stop her from reclaiming what was rightfully hers. When Aminata pulled up at her parents' house, she parked her car carefully and took a moment to steady herself. She had rehearsed what she was going to say, but the tension in her chest still made her stomach twist. As she stepped onto the porch, she noticed a familiar face. Old Mr. Tabane, their neighbor, sitting on his front stoop and watching the street with his usual keen eyes. "Good morning, Mr. Tabane," Aminata said, forcing a casual smile as she passed by. Her voice was calm, but inside her anger simmered. She didn't want anyone to know how frustrated she was, not yet. What she didn't know was that Mr. Tabane had been quietly keeping an eye on her family for years. He had seen countless moments of favoritism, heard whispers of unfair treatment, and even witnessed how her parents consistently elevated Ayodele while overlooking Aminata's sacrifices. Over time, he had quietly taken her side in his mind, wishing he could say something, but respecting family boundaries and his own cautious nature. Now, as Aminata approached the door, he gave a small nod, a subtle gesture but one that carried weight. Aminata didn't realize it, but that nod was a silent show of support. It reminded her that she wasn't entirely alone in this fight. That quiet acknowledgement from someone outside the family gave her courage. A tiny boost that made her chin lift a little higher. Inside, Mr. Tabane would later play a quiet but important role. He didn't intervene directly, but his presence in the neighborhood, his reputation as someone who noticed things and didn't let unfairness slide, subtly influenced her parents. They knew he observed their actions, and though they didn't say it, his watchful eyes added pressure for them to take Aminata seriously. As Aminata stepped toward the front door, she felt a strange sense of reassurance. She had allies even in unexpected places, and sometimes that was all the strength a person needed. Mr. Tabane didn't speak a word to her parents, but by simply being there, by simply noticing, he became an invisible supporter, quietly tipping the scales in Aminata's favor before she even crossed the threshold. Aminata stepped into the house, her heart pounding but her mind sharp and focused. Her parents were sitting in the living room casually sipping tea. Her mother, Amina Dlamini Sr., gave her a faint smile, the kind that said, "I can guilt you into letting this slide." Her father, Mr. Dlamini Sr., looked up with a calm expression, as if nothing unusual was happening. But Aminata wasn't here to stay quiet anymore. She took a deep breath and let her words flow, steady and clear. "The SUV is mine," she said. "I worked hard for it and it's not okay that it was taken without asking. And Mom, Dad, this isn't just about a car. Your favoritism toward Ayodhya has hurt me for years." For a moment the room went silent. Her parents blinked, caught off guard. Aminata could feel the tension rising like an invisible wave. Tears pricked her eyes, but she refused to let them break her composure. "I've supported Ayodhya, paid for things you refused to, always helped where I could. And I've been overlooked. I've stayed quiet for too long and I can't anymore." Her mother's smile faded, replaced by a flicker of surprise and something else: guilt. Her father shifted uncomfortably in his chair, realizing perhaps for the first time that his actions had consequences beyond what he thought. The air was heavy as old resentments, buried for years, surfaced. Voices were raised, not in anger alone, but in the release of long-held frustration. Aminata felt a mixture of relief and strength. Finally, the truth she had carried silently for years was spoken aloud. She wasn't shouting to hurt anyone. She was finally making them see her perspective, making them understand the pain of being invisible in the family she loved. Her parents didn't respond immediately. The silence was deafening, but it was also a powerful signal. For the first time, Aminata felt that maybe, just maybe, they were truly listening. She stood her ground, calm but unwavering, letting her words sink in. This confrontation wasn't just about getting the SUV back. It was about reclaiming her voice, her worth, and the respect she deserved. And as she met her parents' eyes, she realized something important. Speaking the truth, even when it's uncomfortable, is the first step to changing a lifetime of habits. Ayodhya walked into the living room just as the tension between Aminata and their parents was at its peak. At first she looked around, clearly confused. "What's going on?" she asked, her voice hesitant, unsure of the raised emotions in the room. Her eyes fell on Aminata, standing tall and firm, unshaken despite the storm of feelings swirling around them. There was a strength in her posture, a calm determination in her gaze, that Ayodhya had never fully noticed before. For a moment, Ayodhya was silent, watching as her older sister spoke with clarity and conviction, finally saying out loud everything she had kept bottled up for years. Slowly, realization began to dawn. Ayodhya remembered all the times Aminata had quietly supported her, paying school fees for the kids, covering unexpected bills, helping out without complaint, and how those sacrifices had gone unnoticed by their parents. She had always assumed Aminata was just responsible, that it was her role to quietly handle things, while she enjoyed the praise and attention. A wave of guilt washed over Ayodhya. She had benefited from the favoritism without ever questioning it. Now, seeing Aminata assert herself, she understood how wrong that had been. Her voice trembled slightly as she said, "Aminata, I didn't realize. I'm so sorry. I didn't see everything you've done and I shouldn't have just accepted it as if it was normal." Her apology wasn't just words. It carried the weight of recognition and respect. Aminata's eyes softened slightly, but she didn't step back. She had waited years for this acknowledgement, and hearing it now was powerful. Ayodhya's sincere admission shifted the energy in the room. What had started as a confrontation with their parents now became a moment of understanding and connection between the sisters. For the first time, Ayodhya truly saw Aminata, not just as her sister, but as a strong, resilient woman who had quietly carried burdens for the family while remaining unacknowledged. It was a revelation that changed everything. The dynamic between them shifted. There was no jealousy, no resentment, only recognition and a renewed bond built on honesty and respect. Ayodhya reached out, taking Aminata's hand gently. "I promise to do better," she said. And in that moment, Aminata realized that sometimes, all it takes is one brave voice to open someone's eyes to the truth. Their sisterhood, tested but unbroken, felt stronger than ever. Amina Sr. and Mr. Dlamini Sr. sat in stunned silence, their eyes fixed on Aminata. They had always believed she would quietly accept whatever favoritism they showed toward Ayodhya, never speaking up, never making a scene. But now their eldest daughter was standing before them, calm, steady, and unshakable, speaking truths they hadn't wanted to hear. Every word Aminata spoke landed like a small hammer on the walls they had built around their behavior. She didn't shout, didn't accuse, and didn't beg for recognition. She simply stated her feelings, explained her sacrifices, and highlighted the unfair treatment she had quietly endured for years. And in that quiet, controlled way, she exposed the imbalance in the family dynamic more powerfully than any anger or tears ever could. Amina Sr. felt a pang of guilt she hadn't expected. She had always seen Ayodele as the perfect daughter and had assumed Aminata's quiet nature meant contentment. Now she realized that her constant praise for Ayodele and the disregard for Aminata's efforts had hurt her eldest child deeply. Each memory of overlooked sacrifices and unacknowledged support flashed through her mind, and she felt the weight of regret pressing on her chest. Mr. Dlamini Sr. shifted uncomfortably in his seat. He had thought favoritism was harmless, a simple matter of perception, but Aminata's composed and honest words made him see the emotional cost. For years, he had assumed that Aminata would silently accept being in the background, and he had never considered how painful that must have been. Her courage forced him to confront the emotional harm they had caused, and for the first time he felt a real responsibility to make things right. The silence that followed was heavy but meaningful. It wasn't awkward, it was reflective. In that quiet, Aminata's presence and words spoke volumes, giving her parents a chance to absorb the truth without interruption. Every unspoken apology, every realization of past mistakes, filled the room like an invisible weight. For Amina Sr. and Mr. Dlamini Sr., this was a turning point. The eldest daughter they had underestimated had shown them a mirror, one they couldn't ignore. Her calm, assertive presence became a lesson in respect, boundaries, and recognition. In that silence, they began to understand that it was never too late to acknowledge wrongs, learn from them, and start rebuilding trust with the daughter they had once overlooked. Aminata couldn't believe it when her SUV was finally back in her driveway. She ran her hand over the smooth midnight blue hood, the car gleaming as if it knew it had been missed. But this wasn't just about the vehicle. The SUV had become a symbol of respect, recognition, and the boundaries she had finally set with her family. Every dent-free panel, every polished curve, seemed to whisper that she had earned her place, and no one could take it from her without consent. Ayodele appeared, a little hesitant at first, and offered a shy smile. "Aminata, I want to make it up to you," she said softly. "I can drive you anywhere you want this weekend. No asking, no excuses, just wherever you want to go." Aminata felt a warmth spread through her chest. It wasn't the gesture itself, she didn't need rides or favors, but the intention behind it. Ayodele wasn't asserting entitlement this time, she was showing gratitude and acknowledging her sister's sacrifices. For the first time in years, Aminata felt truly seen. Her voice, which had been quiet for so long, was finally respected. She realized that this small victory wasn't just about reclaiming the car, it was about reclaiming her identity in the family. She had stood up, spoken her truth, and enforced her boundaries, and the ripple effect was already visible. Her sister's respect, her parents' quiet reflection, even the supportive nods from neighbors like Mr. Tabane, it all added up to something bigger than she had imagined. Aminata slipped into the driver's seat, her hands gripping the wheel, feeling a sense of freedom that went beyond just driving the SUV. This weekend she would enjoy her plans, her space, and her choices without guilt or hesitation. But more than that, she carried with her the knowledge that she could assert herself without fear, that her worth mattered, and that she could set limits that her family had to honor. As the engine purred to life, Aminata glanced at Ayodele, who climbed into the passenger seat with a small, respectful smile. The family dynamic had shifted, subtly but powerfully. Aminata wasn't just the eldest daughter anymore. She was a force seen and acknowledged, someone who would no longer be overlooked. And as the SUV rolled down the driveway into the open streets, Aminata felt proud, independent, and unapologetically in control of her life. By the end of the weekend, the atmosphere in Aminata's family had begun to shift. The long-overlooked tension around favoritism and recognition had finally been spoken aloud, and for the first time, everyone was talking honestly. Her parents really listened to the ways their actions had hurt her over the years. Ayodele, too, reflected on how she had unknowingly benefited from that favoritism, and there was a quiet understanding forming between the sisters. Aminata noticed her nieces and nephews watching closely throughout the weekend. She realized that her courage to speak up, calmly and without bitterness, had already made an impression on them. They were seeing firsthand that standing up for yourself didn't have to mean fighting or yelling. It could mean setting boundaries, speaking clearly, and expecting respect. Her example planted a seed that she hoped would grow in their own lives. For Aminata, the weekend wasn't just about reclaiming her car or having her parents acknowledge her sacrifices. It was about understanding a deeper truth. Anger alone doesn't change family dynamics, but courage, clarity, and healthy boundaries do. She felt a sense of pride and peace, knowing she had reclaimed her voice and her power without damaging the bonds she valued. As the sun dipped low in the sky, Aminata slid into the driver's seat of her midnight blue SUV, the metal gleaming in the golden light. She glanced at her family one last time, feeling gratitude for the lessons learned, the connections strengthened, and the respect finally earned. She turned the key, felt the engine hum, and drove off down the open road. For the first time in a long while, she felt completely proud, independent, and unapologetically in control of her life. The weekend had started with frustration and injustice, but it ended with clarity, empowerment, and a lasting change that would resonate for years to come.